All right.
All
Here we
right. Hey,
are.
Shannon. Hey,
Hey,
Shannon. How you
Nathan.
doing?
I'm great. Back at it. I'm really excited for our guest today. Um, so good. He's a very good friend. Works very, very, very closely with my husband, and has a great story. And not to mention, a connection with epilepsy. So all
Right. You said his sister has epilepsy?
had or has, that we'll have to ask him.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely had some seizures while he was growing up, and I know I've talked to him about this, that they used to put a spoon in his sister's mouth. So that's uh, interesting, and will be an interesting thing to speak about and to
Yeah.
talk about. And then I know about, I want to say it was about 5 years ago, his daughter had a handful of seizures and went to, we are Orange County people. We live in Orange County, California. And his daughter saw some doctors at Hoag Hospital, which is in Newport Beach. And as far as I know, she's doing
Mm-hmm.
great. She's looking great. She's gorgeous, his daughter is. Uh and I think it was, and again, Guillermo can tell us, it was all, I think it was a result of an infection that she had. But I think you will talk to any parent that a seizure is a seizure is a seizure is a seizure.
Right.
Whether you have it from a seizure disorder or something else that's been caused, either you're still watching your child or a loved one have seizures, is very traumatic. So anyway,
Yes, we'll get into all that. And I'm really excited too, because, in terms of advocacy outside of the epilepsy world, and we'll
yes,
talk about his family relations and how he dealt with epilepsy. But Guillermo was part of the Black 14. So we're going to watch a little video. They actually received the 2023 NCAA Inspiration Award at the NCAA convention. And this is a really, really cool story. And it's truly inspiring. And I'm it's so humbled to have him on as a
yes,
guest. So a little background for our viewers out there is the Black 14 was a group of African American college football players at the University of Wyoming who were dismissed from the team in 1969 for seeking to wear black armbands during a game to protest against racial discrimination. And I think that was because they were um, protesting the BYU game where the Church of Latter-day Saints would not let black men become priests.
yes.
So
And it
what a
was
leg.
their coach that
Hmm.
uh, Lloyd Eaton, right, that would not let them wear those wristbands.
Oh
So
man, I can't wait to get into that. So without further ado, we have this video produced by the NCAA that talks about that. So let's go ahead and get some
let's
more
see it.
backup. Yeah, here we
Yeah.
go.
Decade of the 60s in America began as a time of innocence and hope, but turned into a period of anger and violence. Assassinations, protests, and riots shook the country.
It was the tumultuous 60s.
Hectic, chaotic, not knowing what the future held for you.
Blacks were finally beginning to recognize their importance and their value.
I would consider it a transformational point in our country's history.
Against that backdrop, the University of Wyoming had become a college football powerhouse with a national reputation.
They'd been to the Sugar Bowl, been to the Sun Bowl.
We had moved up to number 12 in the country.
My goodness, we were stacked with players.
We were good as a team, and we were good as individual players.
When the whistle blew, we always thought we could win.
This was a team that was built to take it all in 1969.
The Cowboys were undefeated and facing their rival, Brigham Young University, the upcoming week.
BYU is a pretty good program. However, there was a movement across the country that against the Latter-day Saints.
Because of what their philosophy was about, blacks and the priesthood.
The Black Student Alliance came about saying, hey, would we be part of that protest? And we basically said we didn't We weren't going to protest because what they believed or didn't believe, but we had other reasons the Black 14 wanted to protest, how they treated some of our black athletes when they played in Provo a year or so prior to that, by cheap shotting them, calling them the N-word.
The older players would tell you what would happen and what's going to happen with BYU because it was never addressed. And we knew it was a situation.
And so we were trying to set something up in terms of a protest.
Feeling disillusioned by the discrimination and racism they were experiencing, 14 of the players from the Wyoming team approached their coach with a request.
Well, the plan was to ask him for permission to wear black armbands during the BYU game.
We were going to share with him what had happened and why we feel that there ought to be some physical display.
So as a group, we said, well, we're going to try to make sure that we do this in the correct way. And I think we did.
And it had already been decided that if he objected and didn't want us to do this, we were going to simply play the game.
And so we're going to ask, okay, what will you agree to in way of protest? But we never got a chance to ask that question.
I believe it was Joe Williams, I'm not sure, one of the captains, that said, Coach, we came here today to, he was going to never finish the sentence. That's when the coach started berating us and told us we were all automatically off this football team. We were no longer Wyoming Cowboys.
The Black 14, as they came to be known, were banished from their team.
Where's the dialogue here? There was none.
People think we went in there and refused the game, to play the game, if we couldn't protest. That was not the case at all.
I was very angry, and was angry for a long time.
Some transferred away, some left the school, some never received their degree. The lives of the Black 14 were changed forever.
I was one of the players that remained at the university because I had nowhere to go.
We were considered Black Power advocates, part of the Black Panther Party, and all of it was a lie. We were disparaged all around the country.
Some guys went to Canadian League, some went back on the team. Some didn't go back to school.
There was never anybody, I think, that took ownership of, hey, we should do something to honor these men. And I just felt like it was my job to do that. The University of Wyoming appreciates you, and thank you for being leaders.
I was quite emotional receiving that jacket. We had a written and a verbal apology, but that was an apology that we are now Cowboys again.
The event led to the Black 14 forming an LLC dedicated to giving back. The mission of the Black 14 Philanthropy Group is to educate, feed, and support underserved communities by providing food to needy families and educational scholarships to student athletes.
It was a horrible event that went on in 1969, but we flipped the script. We've turned a tragedy into philanthropy.
Most of the brothers knew that all hate will do is bring you down.
These men, including my dad, have lived extraordinarily productive and great lives. This did not break them.
Each of us had that sense of philanthropy within us, and that sense of, and as we say, old school giving back.
We're still gonna continue to survive and thrive the way we can to make our country a better country.
Despite the negative impact their courageous act in 1969 had on their lives, the Black 14 today stand as an inspiration for their compassion, their dignity, and commitment to making the world a better place.
Whoa.
Hey, that's heavy. That
was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Was wonderful.
Well, without further ado, here he is, the man himself. Welcome, Guillermo.
Thank you.
Guillermo, number 20, Guillermo Hysaw, who was known back then as Willie.
That's right.
Right? I watched the video.
Yeah.
Willie Hysaw. That's a
that is a lot to take. So you guys didn't even get you didn't even get to ask the question of.
No, we didn't. And the whole purpose of it was, we had played BYU the year before, and we were there on the JV squad. So our head coach wasn't there. He was coaching the varsity group. So what happened? He had no idea, and the whole catalyst for it was at the end of the game. You know, you're over there cheering because you won, because we came from way behind and beat them. And we look across the field and everybody's gone. So there was no shaking hands or, you know, so then we head to the locker room. They turned the sprinklers on and we had to run across the football field in the water. So we're wondering, what the heck is this? And as we're walking to the locker room, they had a picture of a black man and a gorilla hanging on the wall. And I'm thinking, okay, facing each other. What's this all about? So we go in, think nothing of it. You know, we're all wet and changing. Next day, the headline on the Salt Lake Tribune read, Brigham Young washes evil off the field. And it goes through this whole story about how the Mormons were getting kicked out all across the U.S. And they ended up in the Great Salt Flats in Utah. And one of their visions that Brigham had was that black people were descendants of Ham, which was one of Noah's sons, and they were cursed because Noah saw his father in the nude, and so we couldn't ascend to heaven after death. They left that part out. And the highest thing that we could attain in life or death was to become a Mormon priest. What we couldn't become Mormon priests because we were the lowest order of life. We were lower than a primate. Oh, okay. That's why there was a gorilla facing a black man. We were lower than a primate. So, bottom line, what did this have to do with football? Nothing. What did this have to do with that game or any other game that we played? Nothing. And so we felt like, okay, we're going to play BYU again next year, but now we're on the varsity, right? And so before we do this, we don't want to just go out there and beat them with our black skins, which is one of the things the coach said we should do. And we said we'd already done that, you know, that in our minds. So he's going to say this. So let's be prepared to address this issue. Let's first of all make him aware of what happened and why we felt that it was, you know, our responsibility to let them know that we didn't agree with them bringing their religious views on the gridiron. Had no place in football. That's what we were initially standing up against, not for them to change their policies or change their religious views. The Constitution gave them a right, freedom of religion. So we weren't trying to encroach on that, but we just didn't feel it had any place in football. So that's what led to everything else. So I don't have to tell that whole story because the video did a good job of saying what happened.
Yeah, it did. And then we have a picture of the reunion shot there.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
we all came, they all brought us back, and this was around two things. First of all, the coach that kicked us off didn't have the authority to do it. So the governor of the state came in, and at that time it was Hathaway. And he fired us after meeting with the trustees and meeting with the legislative team in the state of Wyoming. Wyoming was a state supported school. So back then, that meant that we were employees of the state. So the coach didn't have the authority to kick us off. So the governor met with the coach, and there's another whole long story about that. And at the next day, he didn't come back and meet with us. We saw the headlines in the local paper called the Branding Iron, and it said Governor Hathaway officially fires the Black 14. So we got fired. That was the first time in my life I got fired from a job, and it was there. So we got fired because we wanted to, you know, ask the coach if there was a visual way that we could protest other than our black skins. And of course, we never got to ask him the question. And some of the photos are the pictures you saw. We were sitting in the stands watching that game against BYU. And that's what we were doing. That's why we were there. And all the protesters were at that game because BYU had come to Wyoming that year. So that's kind of the bring that context together.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Wow.
that's so powerful. And then all this is culminating, after the reunion, and that video was part of
Them
another.
apologizing and them
Right.
saying, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you your jerseys back because we had to, they
Okay.
stripped us of that.
Oh,
They
nice. You
gave
got.
us a Letterman's jacket, and they gave us a written letter of apology from the now athletic director. The president Carlson, he's dead, of the university, so he wasn't around. The Coach Eaton, he ended up getting fired the next year and going to Green Bay Packers as a scout,
Wow.
and then they found his body up in a remote area of Montana. He was dead, so he killed
Oh,
himself. So he's
Mm,
gone. So he couldn't be there. And Hathaway, he died. So who was there that was there when
sure.
we got kicked out? Nobody. So the program never went back to another bowl game. Think about that, from 1969 to the 2000s. They hadn't been to a bowl game, and they couldn't recruit any athletes who were of any value. I mean, they had some, but not black athletes. And back then, we were in the top 10 API. We were
Sure.
rated number 5 in the nation. That's why we went to Sugar Bowl and the Sun Bowl, and we were on the way to a bowl game that year. And so part of their forgiveness or apology was, hey, we're going to give you a written letter of apology from the university, which the athletic director is Berman. He wrote and gave. The governor of the now governor of the state, he came and apologized on behalf of Hathaway, who had passed away. And that's why we were there. And they reintroduced us, welcomed us back, basically asked us if we would be ambassadors for the program, and that it was wrong. And in today's environment, we could be a catalyst for their program. So that was kind of the lay of that, the contextual around that visit back there.
Sure. That was really, I watched, it was in 2019, I think, right on the
Yes,
50-year anniversary. That was
that's
really
correct.
special. And watching it, and I had said earlier, I came almost to tears a couple of times, and it was a really um, just
Hmm.
inspiring story. And a couple of things that I really took away was there was a moment when there was a Q&A, a question and answer,
Hmm.
and the team was sitting on the stage, and
Yes,
one of the question was, if uh, Lloyd Eaton was right here, what would each of you say to him?
that's
And I
correct.
thought it was a great question. I thought it,
Hmm.
and to hear everybody's response was even greater. And everybody's response was slightly different. Um,
Hmm.
but and this is, I'm repeating this for our listeners, just so you can get a real true example of the kind of person that Guillermo is. Guillermo's response was, uh, I would thank him for helping me transcend all, and let him know that I am blessed because of that. Um, and because of that experience, I am who I am today. And that's what I would tell him. I would ask him why, but I would tell him that thank you. And I would have a dialogue, not a monologue. And I just thought that was so powerful. Um, Especially, here we are, and 50 years later, and we've come so far, and it's, we're February, it's Black History Month, and I just feel it was such a wonderful thing to say. And one of your teammates said, I would say, you can't break my spirit, but you can
Hmm.
hurt my heart. And I felt like, oh,
Yes.
that was, it kind of, it touched me a little bit. And then Ron Hill said, did you know that we had mothers and fathers? And
Yeah.
that's the one that really took me down. Um, but
Yeah.
as a person with children, and but just the response, you Thank you. You really helped me to transcend all. And I thank you
Wow.
for saying that, because I really feel like that's so powerful. And to our people that are listening, just a little, when Guillermo sends a text message in the morning, instead of saying good morning, he says grand rising. And instead of saying thank you, he says gratitude.
Right.
And these are all things he's worked really closely with my husband on gratitude. And as a wife, I say thank you. And these
You're
are
welcome.
all just some wonderful things about Guillermo that I want people to know. But I know I've said it, and I like to
Yeah.
talk, but can you kind of repeat that and more what you would tell your coach? What would you say to Lloyd Eaton, and in your words again?
Yes, thank you. That was very emotional for me to listen to things that I've said and that whole event again. That was a PBS broadcast, by the way, and they came out
Oh,
to
okay.
yeah to do their deal, and I'm listening to the guys and really deeply thinking about how our lives were impacted by that event. And when I say that event, that whole process, and where are we now? And there's no way to know what we would have done. Yeah, all of us were headed to the pros. They only selected 5 African Americans a year. And back in that day, most college teams didn't have any African Americans on their teams. And so I'm sitting there being thankful because I'm there. I'm being thankful because it resonated with me what the other guys said. Anything from punch him in the face to having some kind of anger, and that's why they labeled us rabble rousers, not rebel rousers, rabble
Mm.
rousers, to incite what a emotional response from the listeners of the audience. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to give a rabble rouser response. I'm going to think about and deeply how that's impacted me, and also what some of the players didn't have the advantage of was the coach himself. And the coach and my high school coach, Paul Briggs, God rest his soul as well, were in the military together, and so my coach was a high school coach who coached, Frank Gifford and those guys. So if you go back in history, you'll get some of the football players that he had. And he was sending all of his best players to Wyoming. I could have gone to UCLA or USC or somewhere I thought was a better college school than
Sure.
for football. And my intent was to play football to get my education. So in thinking about what would I say to him, I put all that stuff together, and I would want to thank him because my life has been a blessing. Everything in my life has been a blessing. Even meeting Andy was a blessing. That was, not planned. I was a executive coach for CEOs and companies that did annual gross revenues of 200 million or more, and he came to me and reached out and said, "Hey, tell me about this program." I signed him up the same day, and that was not by chance. And so I just feel like every single thing, me being a vice president at Toyota and Lexus, all the things that I had to do and got a chance to do from an advocacy standpoint in the last position that I held, all came to my mind as I'm sitting there on that stage. And why would I be angry at that coach? Live or dead, why would I be angry? I was thankful. And that's why my comment was that I didn't react. And to me, reactions are without thought, and certainly without deep thought. I responded, meaning I thought about what would I truly say to him. And Tony McGee, he played for Washington Redskins and New England Patriots, a couple of Super Bowl rings, so he was one of the ones of us that went on and was successful. He said, "Well, how could you even say anything to him? He'd be a ghost." I said, I said, "Well, we're not talking about a ghost. The question was, what would I say to him if he were alive today? So just putting all that in context, it was very emotional listening to each guy. Even the reason for us to not be to wear the armbands, everybody had a different position.
Yeah,
So
sure. That was
Wow.
and it was very emotional to hear everybody, and I haven't listened to anything from, the
mhm.
NCAA, event,
Oh
just,
yeah,
not that, and which I'm excited to. Um,
yes,
but it was also, to hear you say this and, it's, I'm was listening and I have everything to be thankful for, and
mhm,
uh, I hear you say that, and I know life hasn't been easy for Guillermo,
yes,
and um, and and life isn't easy for a lot of people, and
right,
it's it's easy to say, "Oh, well, this happened to me and this happened to me." And I think the easier way out is, to place the
right,
blame, rather than to rise up and be
exactly.
thankful.
Mhm.
And so just knowing you and knowing Andy, and I don't know, I think I'm not sure exactly how many years ago it was, but it was a handful at least of years ago, that I
Mhm.
met you. More than
Right.
that? Uh,
Yeah.
how many? I don't.
2016.
Okay, okay, 2016.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so almost a handful, a little bit more.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I do know that, Guillermo's life prior to this moment hasn't been all peaches and cream and, ice cream and chocolate
Right.
sauce. Like, there's been things that have been difficult. And one of
Mhm.
those things I feel like, and we kind of talked about, was that you grew up with a sister that had seizures. I don't
Yes,
think she has them anymore, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. She was diagnosed as a petite mal
Oh, okay.
epileptic when we were kids, and it got to the point where they were giving me instructions, about uh, being the caregiver because I was at home when my mother was trying to work. We were on welfare. My father had deserted us when we were kids. So, you know, between school and being at home with a younger sister and a younger brother, my older sister had already gotten married and moved away, even though she was still there in Bakersfield. Whenever my younger sister would have these episodes, I was the one that had to be the caregiver. And so, not knowing a whole lot about epilepsy itself, and then also not being really given a what I would consider an instructive protocol for what to do, I was told, that make sure she doesn't swallow her tongue. Well, we know that that doesn't happen. But so what do you do? They didn't have the tongue depressors. I'm not sure the proper name. So I'd use a spoon to try to, get it in her mouth while she's having a convulsion, and to keep her from, and then keep her calm, hold her head up. Different steps that they would tell me to take. But more importantly, that back then they had a pill that dissolved, so it wasn't a liquid medicine, but it was a quick dissolved tablet, and each one of them had a different strength. There were four of them, all the way from like 250s, 500, 750,
Sure.
1,000
Sure.
milligrams, and I would have to figure out which one to give her based on the severity of the seizure. So
Oh,
it got to that,
wow.
yeah, it got to that point. And so I called my sister to make sure. Now I'm not making this up. I'm going to be talking to other people. This is what happened, right? Okay. Well, what happened that caused you not to? Because I went away to college, right? And she said, well, our mother decided that I was being over medicated. So my mother
Okay.
stopped all the medication. And I said, well, what happened? she says, Guillermo, I haven't had a seizure since childhood, and she's
Wow.
in her 60s. So I thought, well, that's amazing because I never brought it up again and said, hey, have you been having seizures? That's her in the green top. And my mother, of course, she's deceased last year, but that's her in the red and in the hat. She's in hospice care. But I said
Wow.
to my sister, I said, well, that's amazing that, and you've not had not one. She said, nope, I have never had a seizure since. So I'm not sure what really happened in terms of my mother or why she even felt that the meds were, too much or the wrong ones. But that's what I was asked to do. So, one of the things they also said is make sure that you stay healthy. You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of her. And so I was reminded of on the airlines when, oh, if we reach a certain altitude and the mask comes down, put yours on first. you know?
Right.
That's
So,
a that.
you know, but, so it was kind of stressful, to see my sister like that. And there was nothing I could really do and not really understanding what she was experiencing or why. I know there was a lot of brain activity, and we were mistold because we were told that certain diseases are what did they say, only happen to the wealthy and the upper class, and
Oh, oh,
we were in
interesting.
the projects and we were poor. And the two diseases that they named were diabetes and, of course, epilepsy.
Sure.
And yeah, and so hey, and your feet would swell if you ate too much red meat, and so there was a third one, but it really wasn't a disease, right?
Sure. Well, there
So
is,
that was my
it's so
experience.
fun. Yeah, it's there it is more common
Yes,
for Black people to have epilepsy. There are more people,
right.
in the world, uh, African American I mean, in Africa, in the United States, um, with epilepsy than any
Right.
other race,
Right.
which is very interesting. And
Yes.
when sometimes we as a foundation, we like to, you know, look at in Black History Month, especially, but all the time, uh,
Hmm.
celebrities or individuals um, that have epilepsy or have had epilepsy. And
Exactly.
the amount of celebrities that are Black that have or have passed away from epilepsy is very high.
Hmm.
And it's a very true fact that,
Yes.
too bad like, we don't know why, there's not technically a reason, but,
Hmm.
um but wow,
Yeah.
those taking those pills that's a tough one. And, I
Mhm.
just, both Nathan and I actually had seizures not that long ago, and my doctor I said to him, "Could I be taking a pill that is causing me to have a seizure? Like, it just doesn't
Right.
mix
Right.
with my body," and he said, "Yes, that's
Yeah.
very real." And,
Yeah.
uh, and that's the problem, it's a
Hmm.
art, it's a science, all of it, figuring it all
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's what's so difficult.
Well, what was interesting about what you just said is, that's basically symptomatically what my mother thought, and she thought, and then having my sister having COPD, it's difficult to, the
Oh,
esophagus to swallow, right? So that's why we got the dissolve type tablet. And so, I'm trying to wedge in a tablet while she's having a seizure, and not knowing if I got the right strength, and then
oh,
the
sure,
whole misconception, but how would I know? You know,
right,
I'm just doing what, hey, they said caregivers should be doing,
sure,
and of course she'd stop and then she wouldn't have one again for a while, or she'd walk into a wall and what is she? And then next thing you know, she's out.
sure,
And then some are to the level of severity she didn't have a recall that what had happened,
right,
and so again, as a high school student, trying to be the caregiver and not understanding, the symptoms or the cause. And then certainly I had no basis for questioning the treatment,
Sure.
but my
Sure.
mother did, and she felt like it was interacting with her the wrong way, and that we're just going to stop. And she did, but I didn't know that had already gone away to college,
Wow.
and then she says, "Oh
Are
yeah."
you you're older than your sister?
Yes. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
the second oldest. I have an older sister. I was number two, and then I had the sister Desiree. Her name was Elizabeth, and we nicknamed Desiree.
Oh, okay.
Uh, she was my younger sister, and then my youngest brother, he died of diabetes. That was
Oh,
the
wow.
other one I told you about. And I
Okay.
had, two uncles, they died of diabetes.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, uh, but he died, many years ago. So as a young man, so by not following the treatment, not having the
Sure.
protocol, which was a catalyst for me to really try to take the position that I will, ultimately became as vice president. What they called then was diversity, equity, and inclusion. I changed it to cultural transformation and business development. So those were the pieces that I did because I was tied to the community in one sense, but then I was
Sure.
also in corporate the other sense. So I was working with dealers and what have you. But to use that platform to have some impact on children, to have some
Sure.
impact on healthcare and health wellness. And two of the things that resonated most with me was food deserts. Number one, that you find in underserved and underrepresented communities, where they're not getting the proper nutrition, they're not getting vegetables and fruits, and they call them food deserts. So working with 100 Black Men of LA, which I ultimately became a president of, that organization. And that's how one of the pictures I sent you was with Reardon. He became an honorary member of the 100 Black Men because we were working with, the youth and the community. And then another one I sent you, Dr. Winston Dobie and Charles E. Young at UCLA had done a study on African Americans in both in healthcare and education, and gave that program to the 100 Black Men. And guess what was in that program? Epilepsy, diabetes,
Oh,
food disparities. And that came from UCLA. And so we named an award after Charles E. Young and Dr. Winston Dobie,
sure.
which obviously Dr. Dobie is dead. I'm not sure about Charles E. Young, but UCLA have that program. So I, as a vice president at Toyota, was funding it, and then we implemented it. And of course, we got Points of Lights awards from 3 presidents of the United States around the work we were doing with what we call young Black scholars. And the UCLA study showed that they were graduating from high school but not going on to college. And they gave the reasons why. And a lot of it, ironically, was tied to health and wellness.
Sure.
And so that was kind of the another form of quote unquote advocacy for me,
Sure.
was to be able to do that.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then I have two more things. I don't know if Nathan, but uh, the other area of advocacy that I heard you guys speak about was with the Black 14 and a
Yeah.
foundation that was built there. And I, being the
Yeah.
CEO of a foundation whose uh, mission is to, one of our missions, I suppose, is to help individuals in disenfranchised community, in
Right.
areas of education and wellness and health and wellness and
Exactly.
education,
Yeah.
and which is very similar, it sounds, like. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Black
Yes.
14 Foundation?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did was when we went there to receive that recognition and letterman's jackets and letters of apology, was we had asked about, well, a number of us lost compensation because we couldn't go on to the pros, and some didn't graduate, so they didn't professionally excel, so they lost money. So, hey, back then when we filed a lawsuit, and it was called Joe Williams versus the University of Wyoming, and Joe was one of the recipients of the Inspiration Award. Um, we were asking for $1 million, and we are going to divide it up equally among the all 14, even though three of our guys have all died ahead of us, and so, but we were going to recognize everybody. Couldn't do that, so they said, well, what we'll do is you guys can establish a foundation. And the foundation at the university, monies can go into the foundation, but we're not going to give you honorary degrees. We're not certainly not going to give you any money, but we'll help you with your foundation. And your foundation can do two things. One, it can address scholarships for those that may want to go back to school, and the school itself would have to be Wyoming. It couldn't be a scholarship to a school of your choice, So
Of
you
course.
can come here, and then we'll give you a full scholarship, and it'll come out of the foundation. And then the other one is to be able to take any funds that are raised and use it how you see fit to benefit the community at large. So one of the initiatives that came out of that was the LDS Church of all entities has a annual and ongoing monthly food bank, and they have their own farm. They raise food and then they give it away. And so they wanted to do a collaboration and align themselves with us to give away 20,000 tons, not pounds, tons of food per truck to
Wow.
nonprofits that we would identify, and they would give us 36 trucks over the next 3 years, and this was 4 years ago, so that program's over. But they were doing it before we became part of it, and they're doing it now. And so each one of us would have to identify a nonprofit, and that nonprofit had to be a 501c3. They had to look and vet it and legitimate, and then they would ship the truck to that location. They'd show up with us, so you saw a picture of the pallets of
Sure.
food, what have
Yep.
you, and they show up with us. And so I got one truck here. I tried to get one tied into Andy. So the beauty of me being with Andy
Oh,
is
sure.
he's dealing with the homeless, right? Whether
Right.
they're veterans or not veterans. And so the Home Key Project and being able to do stuff with the VA, which is going to be announced by the new mayor, Karen Bass, that we're taking veterans off the street. 4,000 people, this year off the street. So, so one of the things I wanted to do is to be able to say what we not only house them, but we feed them.
That's
And
great.
so, yeah. So, what's the next thing you want when you have a house? You have to eat every day, right? And
Yep.
so, and so, that was my intention, was to try to expand it beyond that. So, out of the foundation, the Black 14, established at the University of Wyoming, this collaboration occurred with the LDS Church to be able to give food. So that would address, as I mentioned earlier, food disparities and what they call food deserts, because all of this food meets the criteria for healthy foods. It's not peanut butter and jam, which we used to get from the welfare when I was a kid. We'd line up, me and my mother and daughter, and my older sister would be shamed to go, and we'd get these boxes of powdered milk and this hard cheese and a big bag of beans, and from the commissary at the welfare, right? And that was what they gave us as part of the welfare package. So this was way beyond that. So I had roots in my head, about how we were going to use this foundation. And now I'm thinking, as a result of the health and wellness piece, what can we do to address what's happening with epileptics? And so, in being a coach with Brett Hundley, who has this foundation, Brett's one of my clients. So I
Mhm.
coach him on both his personal and professional. I'm thinking of ways to collaborate and use the funds that we have there to support the Epilepsy Foundation, because I know from personal experience what it was like with my sister. And I know from personal experience that they're not getting the right information. They're not getting
Right.
the right level of treatment. They're not,
Sure.
these trucks show up in the community that, that was really prevalent during COVID, giving them immunizations if they wanted to take them. But what are they
Sure.
doing about the more serious and predominant,
Sure.
diabetes and epilepsy?
A
Nothing.
hundred.
So that's my intent there, and
Yeah.
uh, and I just
And I
wanted to get
think,
all of that in there real quick so that you'd understand
well, I
it's
think
broader
it's,
than just
it
scholarship.
it reminds me of Brett and the Henley Foundation, and I think, for those who are listening who don't, Brett's a, professional football player. He's
Yep.
currently signed with the Ravens,
Yep.
and it's actually just come out. He is going to do a season with the XFL with
Mm-hmm.
the Vegas Vipers to get in some
Yep.
off-season experience. So,
Yep.
and Brett himself is a chef and a cook,
Yep.
has in the past brought in same trucks of food to homeless shelters and things of that nature.
Right.
So he's, really trying to combine his passion with something very similar. And I think what a great way. I mean, the LDS to get them back involved. I think
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
really a fantastic thing, but to do. But before we move on, Brett had this to say.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Guillermo Hysaw embodies the true essence of courage and determination. His historical achievements serve as a reminder that even in the face of adversity, one can fight for what is right and create a lasting impact.
Wow.
And I
I'm
I
humbled.
think that's, what we've been trying to let our listeners and viewers know the whole time. Just from our perspective, you do a very good job of sharing that part of yourself. But
Thank you. Thank you. I
I,
appreciate that.
I
Didn't
and
know
I've
that.
been I feel like I've been dominating this whole a- aspect. Nathan's sharing pictures, but I do want to talk a little bit, and I know your daughter. Well, I'm going to say this: you and Brett also have that in common, in that um,
Yeah.
your
We have
sisters
sisters.
with
Right.
seizures.
Yeah.
And then on a very similar note, Brett has a nephew with pretty severe epilepsy also, and you had a or you have a daughter who had seizures, and
Yeah.
a handful of them,
Mm-hmm.
and isn't she gorgeous?
Yeah.
I mean, like stunning. I can't even with this right now. Um, right?
Yeah.
She's
Yes.
beautiful. What's her name
Absolutely.
again? What's her
Megan.
Megan, that's right. Megan.
Yeah.
And tell us, wait, go back. Will you go back, Nathan?
Mm-hmm.
There's Megan. We go to back to the family picture. There we go. Will you tell
Yeah.
us, Guillermo, who everyone is?
Yeah. That's on the left. Our left is in the red top is my daughter Megan, my youngest son Imari, of course me, my wife Kimberly, and my oldest son Stephen Jamal.
All
Jamal
right.
is my oldest son is an imam. Studied in Syria, Damascus, and lived in Yemen for many years. And he travels all over Europe and parts of the U.S. Teaching Islamic law.
Oh,
And of course,
wow.
he's dressed traditionally because he came to me, so he wasn't wearing his normal attire. And then my youngest son, Amari, he works for Uline. He's a regional director for Uline, which a lot of the products that we use in construction and in the industry in general, they populate Lowe's and Home Depot with a lot of things that safety
Oh.
related, et cetera. So that's my youngest son. And then my wife, she's been with Delta Airlines for over 40 years, 50 years.
Right, that's
And
right.
uh, and my daughter, she graduated from USC and then went to Culinary Institute and worked for Food Network, and now she does still work with them, and then she does some. Yeah, matter of fact, NBC is going to be putting her on a program, maybe on a regular basis, doing culinary type stuff. So she's still doing that, and then working independent with different. When that picture of Richard Sherman, that was a Panera Bread deal that they were doing, and she was there to
Oh.
do one of his recipes with his wife, and so she was working with Panera Bread at that time.
Oh,
And then, of
yeah,
course,
that's
you
right.
got me over there with Denzel Washington, and that was at an event. That was at an event where we were the BET Awards, and we were sponsors
Oh,
for that. So, and then again, that was again specifically around an advocacy initiative. So,
oh, that's great.
yeah,
Oh, I love that. That was great. Those wow. That's
yeah,
a so can you tell us a little bit about the experience of, your daughter and having the
yeah.
seizures and,
Yes, she actually, she travels extensively because of my wife, and then us, we travel quite a bit. My wife working with Delta Airlines, and her and some friends decided to go to Machu Picchu, and they were going to go on a tour and what have you. And on the way, we think that, it was either something she ate or drank, but everybody else had it too, but nobody else had any side effects. And it was, she had a reaction and it was almost debilitating. So they weren't going to let her fly back because they didn't want to be responsible for anything that happened on the plane. So we eventually got her back home, hospitalized her. They did a series of tests, found a bacteria of some sort. They never told us the name of it, that they thought. They weren't clear on whether or not it had caused the uh, seizures that she was having. And I saw the similarity between what she was experiencing and my sister in terms of the seizure. So that
yeah,
my first thought was, this is a epileptic seizure. I didn't
sure.
want to say that, but having had experience with it, I know what it looks like. And so she recovered from that, and then not too long later, she had another seizure. These seizures, and then most recently, not even what, 2 months ago, a month ago, she had another one. So she was
Oh, I didn't
diagnosed
know
with,
that.
just I would say, yeah, just 4 weeks ago, we had to
Oh.
rush her over to Hoag Hospital again, and they diagnosed her with acute migraine. That's what they said was the catalyst for it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that she was having acute migraines, and to the point where it then developed into a seizure. But what they prescribed was very different than what I had experienced, many, many years ago with my
Sure.
sister. And it was they called it a migraine cocktail. And what it was a bunch of different migraine pills
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the pharmacy that you put together, and then they had one specific prescriptive medicine for her to take in the event that she had any discomfort, and that the cocktail wasn't. So obviously, she didn't take the cocktail. She didn't want to take it,
Oh,
and
sure.
but they, diagnosed her with acute migraine, and she's been having these
Oh,
migraines off and on to different degrees of severity. But so we're not sure what it is, to be
sure.
honest with you, and it doesn't happen on a routine basis or frequently enough to really, I don't know how to more do more exploration, because we've been, thanks to you and your organization, had certain doctors look at her and examine her, and they've not diagnosed her as petite or grand or any more of epilepsy. So I'm not saying we ruled it out, but you know, there's been
Sorry.
no eye to it.
Sure. I love that. Any mall, because it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was good.
well, Nathan and I can, relate on all the malls,
All
or
the
all the
malls.
malls, all the malls.
Yes.
Uh, and I didn't know about the most recent. So she's supposed to take the medicine when she feels bad, and
Yes.
it will hopefully
Prevent it.
prevent the
A
seizures.
seizure or anything, and make the migraines go away.
Oh,
So the seizures are
interesting.
provoked by the migraines, is what it sounds
Yes.
like, and they're
Sure.
the cause, right?
Right.
Whereas epilepsy is two or more unprovoked seizures. So
Right.
Right.
without the absence of, yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, we
The
wish
Right.
her
distinction.
But we
yeah.
also know that migraines and epilepsy a lot of times go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I will say in my family, epilepsy is genetic. My nephew
Hmm.
has it. My dad they're called myoclonic jerks. Like they're just a little,
Yes.
like you've got your coffee cup and it,
Right.
um,
Right.
but to me, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Of course, my doctor, who is also at Hoag, says
Hmm.
it's a big deal. It's a big deal. You're still
Yeah.
having a seizure.
That's right.
But my brother has migraines. Really gets
Hmm.
really bad migraines, and he's
Hmm.
he's the dad of my nephew that has epilepsy.
Oh,
And
God. Yeah.
so it's interesting if we put it all together, we
Hmm.
would my guess is that we would find some correlation in
Yes.
there. Um
Definitely. Yeah.
so but who
So we're
knows? I mean,
monitoring it very closely because,
okay,
I'm not taking anything for granted because I've had that experience. And
sure.
again, like I said, I observed it. I know what the treatment protocol was back then. And thanks to you and Brett, I know what it is now. And so uh, I jumped right away. I'm not trying to be
Sure.
the medic or do any prognosis. I get her over to Hogan and at any cost, and then we stay there until they come back and release her, and
Oh, good.
hydrating her isn't enough, which is all they
Right.
did the last time. They hydrated her and then sent her home with a cocktail, migraine cocktail. That's what they
Yeah.
called it. So
Wow, that's
Yeah. The
interesting.
famous cocktail.
yeah,
I've never heard about that, and I'm curious to find
yeah,
out what's in it. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
tell us, well, I mean, I know we're almost up, but tell us, Guillermo, how is that? What's that like watching your daughter have a seizure?
Again, it was flashbacks of being with my sister. It's you feel like you're the parent, right, or the caregiver. You don't even have to be a parent in any of those cases, but in mine, I'm the parent, and you want to do something to not just help them but to prevent it. And to me, as I'm observing it, I'm thinking again, what can I do, what could I do, or how can I help prevent, not treat this from happening. And this is my daughter that I'm observing, I'm witnessing. It was my sister that I observed and I witnessed, but what could I do about it? Nothing. And then the protocol that they gave me, that was responding to what already occurred. But is there enough research being done? Is there enough education being shared in terms of even the treatment and the protocols that you need to do? And if you can feel it coming on, who do you tell, or they need to know as well. Not only the caregiver, but the person that is experiencing these episodes. You know,
Yes.
I want to know, how I can do something to help prevent it. I didn't want to say cure because I don't know that it's a curable thing, and I don't know enough about the genetics of it to say that how do you test for it in advance to know that this is going to happen. So then we need to prepare for the onset of these things occurring. I don't know
Sure.
that. So that's
Yeah.
that's where I feel helpless, but at the same time, I feel encouraged and inspired myself by the need. Here's another area that we, meaning me and anybody else who consciously wants to have an impact.
Sure.
I supported the Danny Thomas Children's Hospital in Memphis
Oh
many
yeah.
years ago,
Sure.
and did stuff with them. So anything that has to do with kids, you got me,
Yeah.
and this
Sure.
is where you first start to find out about these types of things, but specifically epilepsy itself and
Sure.
seizures, period. Because
Yeah.
they all look the same, they all have the same, onset, but what can we do about it? So
Sure.
that concerns me.
Yeah,
And
and it's very some types of seizures, I wouldn't call them curable, but people
yeah,
can grow out of them.
right,
Some are
right,
treatable.
right.
Oftentimes they're very treatable. Some are
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
Some, if they don't catch them early enough, they're gonna, have horrible effects on a, newborn or baby's, you know, brain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot. And I always think it was very interesting, very uh just how we met you, and
Mm-hmm.
uh I've, had seizures and epilepsy forever,
Mm-hmm.
and then not much later your daughter started having them, and how
That's
you've been
right.
just such a great influence and impact in my husband's life, and that was a real,
Mm-hmm.
I think he feels like you help him so much, and I think that was an area that
Thank
he
you.
really felt like he could
Yeah.
give you something back. And
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know if you have any more pictures, Nathan, of to share, but I'm going to read a little quote from my husband, about
Hmm.
Guillermo. And
Oh,
it
okay.
says, I don't know if you do. If you don't, it's fine. I know we had a lot and I thought they were all so interesting, but
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
no, I got you go ahead and read. I got some amazing photos here. Yeah.
Okay, great. So my husband, Andy, has said, Guillermo has been instrumental in me not only turning my business around, but also tuning me into how I can harness my true potential through gratitude, goal setting, and believing anything I want to achieve is possible.
Well,
And it's true, and I know I see it. I live with him, I see him as a parent, and I
mhm.
I know that it's true, and so I just thought that was really special. Uh,
Well, it
Wanted
is.
to share
Thank you
that.
so much for sharing that.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
very humbled by that. My
Aw,
my my one last thought in answer to your question about how it makes me feel. The STEM program,
mm,
science, technology, engineering, and math. The technology piece and the science piece. I sat on the board over at Cal State LA under Dr. Keith Young, who is the engineering, computer science, and technology dean of that college. And when I sat on his board, one of the things I was thinking about is how could we harness the science and the technology and have that have an impact on
sure.
epilepsy and seizures? Because if it's tied to I don't know all of the biological terminology, but the electro frequencies in the body and tied to the mind and the brain, what
Yep.
technology is being developed around that? To me,
Yes.
that's the research component that really could be a catalyst to prevention, if not cure. If it's genetic, then it would have to be prevention. It couldn't be cure.
Sure.
But for some reason, my younger sister grows out
Right.
of it and doesn't have them anymore. My daughter doesn't have them as frequently, but then I know others that do. And
Sure.
so there has to be some science and some technology, and that causes me to want to reach back out to Dr. Young and find out more about what's happening in the medical realm of the STEM program.
Yes.
Let's
And I
see.
think that that's such an important thought, And there, I know, and Nathan knows, there is a good amount happening, and there's an organization here in Southern California called Cure.org, and they are all about finding, um, doing research and finding a cure for epilepsy. What does Cure stand for? I forget exactly.
Citizens United in Research
For
and
research,
Epilepsy. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
There,
and
Super.
yeah, it's a great program. And uh the also, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cameron Boyce. Cameron
Yes.
Boyce, okay. So his family has the foundation. Cameron Boyce, for those that are listening, anybody in the epilepsy world knows who Cameron Boyce is, but Cameron Boyce was a Disney star who
Mm-hmm.
passed away from,
Yeah.
it's called SUDEP, sudden unexpected death from epilepsy. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
his parents are very closely tied to the Cure organization, and they also have their own organization. And uh, they are closely tied to, finding out why this is happening so that people aren't
Yeah.
passing away from seizures.
Yeah.
And the kind of epilepsy that Cameron Boyce had is the same kind of epilepsy that Nathan and I have. And
I. Oh.
although we don't have as many seizures as a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people, and if on the spectrum of epilepsy, we're very well controlled. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we do have the kind of seizures that if somebody is not around, we could choke on blood
That's
or some and pass away. And actually, my most recent seizure, which I'm not sure if you have talked to Andy, was just a week
right. Yes,
ago.
I did.
Um,
Yeah.
he said, and this was really the first time, but that the way that I was seizing, I had hit
Mm-hmm.
my mouth, and I was actually bleeding from my mouth, and he
Mm-hmm.
had to turn me so that I wouldn't choke on my own blood. And
Wow.
that was
Yeah.
really the first time. And so what happens is that happens in at night, in the middle
Yes.
of the night, and there's nobody around. Uh, and
Yes.
I've never had a seizure when I've been sleeping. I'm not sure if Nathan has, but it
Mm-hmm.
is the same kind of epilepsy. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
it's good to know that people are hopping on board, and helping
Mm-hmm.
out. The other family that's really gotten involved with Cure is the family from Hamilton, the musical,
oh, Miguel
Lin-Manuel
Cervantes.
Miranda, or I don't know, what's his name? I anyway, they
Mm-hmm.
had a daughter with pretty severe special needs,
Mm-hmm.
who passed away, also, I think, from a seizure. Not just right? I think she actively was having a seizure. I don't know the story, but
Uh,
they have become very involved in the epilepsy community.
Oh, okay.
So, which is
Yeah.
really, it's great to have people, that are well known, or have family members that were well known, that are now actively,
Yes.
become active. That's what we say, are active in advocates, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, just doing something to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
using their voice, I think.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I think appropriately when you talk about football players or any athlete that has that kind of a platform, like Brett is doing, bringing awareness, not only bringing awareness, but then bringing in resources to address the research and and the technology around the science of prevention, care, and cure, to me is huge. I think that, appropriately, that's something that you can take any type of platform that gives you a greater audience and talk about things outside of you that impact everyone, uh, and someone in the community at large. So somebody at every game has something.
For
Somebody at
100.
every audience has something. You don't always know what that something may be, but if they know that you are taking your platform and addressing that something that's relevant and relative to them, to me that's powerful. And that's a good use of not only your time but your energy as a athlete. And all the athlete means is that you have a halo effect, and that halo effect is what? The people that see you as being great at what you do, and some people wanting to aspire to be like you. And so, why not be comprehensively like me? Because the me is beyond what you just see on the athletic field. The me
Sure.
is what I do outside of that in the area of giving and giving back and trying to have an impact on health and wellness, particularly with that something for everyone. And so, my
Sure.
encouragement is for athletes to do that. I don't care what sport you're in. When I was sitting there talking to Peyton Manning, that's what I told him. I said, guess what? Your legacy isn't going to be football. It's going to be the impact that you have on those kids that are looking at you. And oh, by the way, it may be somebody you don't even know, that you never meet, and you will have a huge impact on their lives and the direction that they take in life. So you have a halo effect. Be careful what you do, Peyton. He and I were sitting there just talking behind the stage, and this was a real conversation. And he looked at me and he said, "Thank you for that, Guillermo. Thank you." And so my feeling is that every athlete should take the opportunity to use their platform, not for political reasons or any of that. I mean, if they want to do it, that's up to them. But the thing that I said to Peyton was, your real legacy is going to be the impact you had on others and the
Sure.
difference that you made in their lives. And I think that this is a great opportunity to make the awareness of the epilepsy, the foundation, and what it is and how it impacts your life. And these seizures that you don't know what they really are may be just that. So you need to pay attention, and then you need to get involved and not just use your money for, you know, peripheral things or superfluous things, in my opinion, uh, that really don't impact the people that are sitting in the stands and the audience watching you.
Sure.
So now you can then spread it, and you can be contagious in a positive way by making them aware of what it is that you support, why you support it, and how they themselves can get involved. And to me, that's huge. And
Huge.
science and technology is huge. We
Mhm.
really need to access that. We really do.
Yep. 100%. Uh, do
Well,
you, I mean, that was amazing. I don't know, Nathan, if you have any other questions.
I just have a big thank you I want to send to you, Guillermo, for joining this program. And in the back of my head, in addition to your story and how you've taken care of your sister and your learning and you continue to transcend, in the back of my head, I've been thinking about how you said on this program, reactions are without thought. And I've been thinking about all the stupid reactions I've had over my life.
Right.
And I've never heard it put I've never heard it put that way. So I am
Yeah.
sending a big thank you, especially
You're
when we
welcome.
talk about advocacy, as Shannon has pointed out. And, we're really involved in the advocacy for epilepsy. And it's more than just sort of raising awareness. It's like, well, what's the means to the end? What's going to
Yes.
take us down that road to
Yeah.
a cure? What's going to take us down that road to completely prevent that? Like, where is the smart move to put resources
Yep.
Hmm.
to end epilepsy? And
Yes.
a lot of people can come in and just kind of react and just be kind of say, oh, well, let's do that. Yes.
Hmm.
And then sometimes I've also seen resources thrown without much thought. So,
Hmm.
uh, you've answered a lot of my questions. I thought Shannon's done an amazing job asking, especially my question was going to be about kind of advocacy in the sports arena. which you
I
just
see.
actually answered that with your story
Yeah.
with Peyton Manning. So instead of a question right now, I just want to give you a big thank you and a big
Yeah, me
Thank
virtual
you.
hug.
too. That was
Yeah.
Thank
right.
you.
It was interesting from beginning to end, Guillermo. I think
Thank
the
you.
world of you. I'm so happy that you agreed to be on the
I
podcast,
think
and I can't wait till the next time I get to see you. So, oh, and
I
I did
think
have one question.
yes.
What did you do after? You said and some people went to different colleges, some people
Yes.
stayed. What did you
Yes.
do?
I actually moved to Michigan, and the attorney that represented us in the case against Wyoming adopted me so that I wouldn't have to pay out of state tuition. And I went to
Ah,
Michigan State's Honors College. It was called Oakland University, and I didn't play sports initially, but the Dallas Cowboys were interested in me, so I went there and got my undergrad degree in philosophy and psychology. Fast forward, coming back to California years later, working with, I thought, hey, you know what? I think I owe myself the tryout. So I went to Thousand Oaks to Cal Lutheran College, which used to be the Dallas Cowboys off-season training camp, and I thought I was going to be a walk-on and make the team, right? So they had interest in me, but everywhere I would go work-wise, they would say, "Oh yeah, you're that rabble rouser troublemaker." And so I
oh,
got
Mm.
labeled that way with General Motors, which I did end up going to work for and for 16 years, and then leaving them and going to Toyota and Lexus. But I did a tryout and left the same day. So I was told that, hey, you have a no pickup option, which meant either I played for Dallas or I played for no one. And I thought, you know what, I can make more money, in corporate America than playing foot. Back then, they didn't have multi-million-dollar contracts,
sure.
and so I went to work for General Motors, and then 16 and a half years later, a bunch of promotions and what have you. I got recruited to start, name, and launch the Lexus division of Toyota. And
Wow.
so I had a position as a regional director for Porsche Cars North America, and I went that to become one of the first 10 people to name, launch, and roll out Lexus worldwide in California. So I got back with them, and of course, a series of promotions and stuff. That's why I sent you all those paper articles with each one of my promotions, so all the way up to VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Wow.
And did that until I took early retirement to give back and become a consultant working with the same Lexus dealers. We only appointed 200 nationwide. So Toyota didn't want to do it. So I launched it in several countries around the world and then came back and then became their coach
Wow.
outside of Toyota, and then was with Vistage Worldwide as a executive coach
Sure.
and a consultant, and that's how I met Andy. And then the
Oh,
relationship grew to the point where I
sure.
thought, you know what, I'd rather do work with Andy because his advocacy, his number one thing, other than being a great husband and father, is being, and I call him this, a philanthropist extraordinaire. He believes in giving back to others, period. And so I'll show you this metaphorically. If Guillermo was a mythical person, this would be me. And what it is it's a guardian angel protecting children. And so I've got many different statuettes and figurines, but this one exemplifies who I would be. So I'd be out there doing anything health and wellness wise or socially wise to protect children. So this has always been my little thing, and it sits in my man cave upstairs. I brought it down here in my office just to show you, even though you didn't
I
ask.
love it.
No.
So
I love it.
this would be me, and Andy's giving back. Generally, I'd be giving back only to the kids. I figure once you become an adult, you can make your own decisions, but as a kid, you can't. You're helpless, and you depend on others, and sometimes there is no parent or parents. In my case, that was the case. There was no father. And so as a result, who do you turn to? Gangs, or somebody that cares for you or loves you, or you think they do, nurtures you. So why not be me,
Sure.
as an advocate? And why not be an organization such as the Huntley Foundation? Why not be that to some kid out there that
Right.
needs you? So anyway, didn't ask me that, but I just thought I'd add
I
that
love
in.
that.
Oh,
Well,
that's
that you know
great.
what? I think that that's a great way to end.
Mm.
I think
Thank you.
that about sums up this entire podcast.
Thank you so much.
I think so. So
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much,
thank
Guillermo.
you so much, Guillermo. I don't
Thank
know that
you.
we've talked this long with any of our guests, so
Well,
I
I'm sure to get
appreciate it.
edited down to what's relevant.
I don't know. I think it was more
I
relevant.
yeah.
Nathan has a big job,
This
so
All
might go
right.
just straight online. Thank you so much, Guillermo. We'll definitely be in touch
All
and follow
righty.
up about this to get this out to the world. So again, thank you and have a blessed rest
I
of
am
the day.
humbled. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. This
thank
was
you.
more than
Thank
what I
you so
expected.
much, Guillermo. We
All
appreciate it.
righty. Have a
Okay.
blessed
Okay.
day.
Thank
Take
you.
You
care.
You
too.
too. All
Bye.
right.
All
Bye.
righty. Bye bye.